Soon it'll be the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks on America, attacks on all Americans. It's important to know what these attacks represent. A bit more than 200 years ago, some brilliant men got together and hammered out a framework for a new nation. These men were not perfect men by any means, nor was the framework a perfect one. But that framework, that Constitution, was quite simply the most remarkable national framework the world had ever seen. Even more, it was the most consequential, the most radical, the most revolutionary document ever written after the Holy Bible. And no one has surpassed it to this very day. These men had just finished a war in which they had separated this nation from England. England, the native country for many, the mighty empire that had both exiled many of them to these shores and nurtured them as colonists representing the homeland. But relations between the colonies and England soured, and Americans fought a war to break away from England and start their own country. When it came time to set down the rules that would govern this country, there were many thoughts as to how to proceed. Some even wanted to make George Washington the king. Others wanted a pure one-man, one-vote democracy. They finally settled on a representative republic and established it in the Constitution. A constitution that was, at once, merely imperfect men trying to form a more perfect union, and a document that bore the seeds that would lead one day to the end of slavery, of discrimination, of any notion whatsoever that any American citizen was less than an American in full. Oh, that didn't happen right away. There were millennia of deeply ingrained structures to be abolished, or completely reformed, or even uprooted, root and branch. But the genius of this framework was such that the elimination of heavy-handed government on the backs and necks of the people, all the people, took place in less than 200 years. The people who developed this framework and believed in it accomplished nothing less than the following. Except for 4 years, when we were doing our level best to tear this country apart in a bloody civil war, America has always been, in every period of her existence, the greatest, most generous, freest, most jaw-droppingly astonishing nation this world has ever seen. She still is. Back to this very sad anniversary. This nation, the one conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, as a pretty good speaker once said, was the nation that 19 bloodthirsty thugs tried to wound mortally 20 years ago. And to what end? Their goal was, and remains for many, to establish a primitive, brutish thugocracy in which women will be forced to walk about in body bags outside, if that is the men in their lives even grant them permission to go outside. And worse, when Osama bin Laden learned of the terrible toll from September 11th, he must have been bitterly disappointed. Only 3,000, he must have thought. That'll never do it. Imagine with me what his response would have been to the question, well, how many would you have wanted to kill? You and I both know his answer would have been simple. All of them. Every last man, woman, and child. I remember laughing bitterly when some commentators said in astonishment, "But he killed Muslims too. What was he thinking?" I wondered how anyone could ask such an inane, stupid question, as if that pitiless goon worried about anyone's life. He wasn't thinking, he was killing, which is what barbaric, primitive thugs do, because it's what they like to do. And yet, here we are, 20 years later, still the nation to which 7.5 billion people around the world would sacrifice everything to come. Still the greatest, fondest hope of those same billions. Still the shining city on the hill, the beacon of freedom in a worldwide sea of darkness. A place where if you're an American and you don't drop to your knees every single day and thank God for that incalculably precious gift, then you just don't understand. Still America. Still, by far, not even close, heads and shoulders, up to the moon and back again. The greatest nation the world has ever seen. That's what the September 11 thugs hoped to destroy 20 years ago. And not only that, they hoped to wipe out the very idea of America, the idea of freedom, the idea of individual liberties, the idea of equal rights under the law, the idea of free speech, freedom peaceably to assemble, freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances, and sometimes to have those grievances actually redressed. However, it'll take a lot more than 19 depraved, bloodthirsty mass murderers to kill America. It'll take neither less nor more than the internal rot we see everywhere around us. Watch the news in growing despair as you hear of the mounting death toll in great city after great city. Watch as people lose their livelihoods, their families, their futures because of an imagined slight. Watch as the children and grandchildren of the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy and brought down Nazi Germany, who then brought down the Soviet Empire, one of the bloodiest in history, people who walked on the moon, for crying out loud. Now the sons, daughters, and grandchildren of these hardy people cower in their houses from a disease that attacks only the aged and infirm. So much internal rot, but there's also plenty of courage, integrity, character, fortitude, generosity of spirit, faith in God, love for all that is good and decent, and we Americans can rise up against the rot and bring about a new birth of love for this magnificent nation that stares down both the foreign bloodlust and the internal rot, making them both slink away, back under the rocks where they festered for so long. September 11th is a day to reflect and remember those who were lost, to thank again the countless heroes who rose to the challenge of responding to unspeakable barbarity, cruelty, and mayhem. They responded with liberation, with compassion, with a real desire to free millions around the world from long-worn shackles, from jackbooted thugs, from proud, cruel tyrants. And was it all worth it, as we watch America retreat again? Well, in 10,000 years, no one will remember their individual names. But today, and for lifetimes to come, and in 10,000 years, people will say that yes, after September 11th, 2001, America loudly, conspicuously, openly, full-throatedly stood for freedom around the world, for the sacred idea that all men, all women, all children, all people are created equal in the eyes of the only one who counts, in the eyes of God. God who loves every last man, woman, and child every bit as much as if he were his only begotten Son. It is always, it was always, and it always will be worth it to spread that message. It is always, it was always, and it always will be worth it to fight the good fight, to do the right thing, to love your neighbor as yourself, to love this nation that has given us all so very much. And it is always right and worth it to drop to our knees in prayers of gratitude, to pray for the peaceful repose in heaven of those we lost on that terrible day, to pray for peace, for healing, for courage and wisdom for those for whom this anniversary is an agonizing reminder of unfathomable pain. For us, our task is simple. As Todd Beamer said when his Flight 93 was hijacked by the Islamist goons of September 11th, let's roll. In honor of and tribute to the heroes of 9/11 and afterward, this has been a production of Boundless Financial Solutions. God bless you all on this 20th anniversary of September 11th, and God bless America, and thanks for listening.